Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. That's the clavinet. Right, shut up, you. Okay, that's the clavinet. Originally, this was meant to be a clavichord, which is a similar type of keyboard instrument, much older. Uh, I had perhaps incorrectly assumed that it would be simpler, and I really wanted to build a keyboard instrument of some kind, and clavichord seemed interesting and novel, and well, you can make it electric and all that stuff. So it seemed like a pretty easy thing to do. Um, in reality, it was pretty complicated. Part of that was because how I approached it. I tried to like 3D model the entire thing. That's not really my mo. Um, so I had a bunch of pieces. For instance, I printed all of the keys. This is part of the 3D design part. I 3D modeled all of these keys. There's a little rod. You can't really see it. There's a little rod going through the back of them. Printed all the keys out. I had them in a bag. I had that rod that they were designed for, and these little washers to go in between. I bought the strings. I bought the pickups. I bought the tuning pegs. These are all zither pins. I bought all of the pieces, and they just kind of sat on the shelf for a while. Till a couple years after that, when I came back, and I was like, this would make a great clavinet, which the main difference is, my understanding is, some experts can probably call me out on this, but the main difference that I'm aware of is that the clavinet has, I believe, what's called an anvil on the body of the instrument. It's this kind of rigid, like a hard edge, and the key doesn't actually have that part on it. The key strikes from behind. You can kind of see here. I'll zoom in on it later. Key strikes from behind, and it basically pushes down on the string with a sort of a rigid, soft-ish object. I think on real clavinets, it's like a piece of rubber or something. And that slams it against the anvil, which gives it this really kind of sharp and percussive sound. You get a lot of the kind of sparkly mids that you don't get on other stuff, which I think is what makes it such a versatile instrument in mixing. Like, if you know to listen for clavinets, you'll find them everywhere. It's all over the place, just hidden in the details of mixes. There's very, very, very few really prominent clavinet parts, but the smaller details are all over the place. Anyway, meant to be a clavichord, turned into a clavinet. That's kind of the why and the how. One of the benefits of a clavinet is you kind of can just have a giant piece of some enormous rigid object, which in my case is like two 2x12s, and some other pieces of wood. Maybe not the most structurally sound thing ever, but it works okay. It's okay for this. You kind of just can do that and put some strings across the top and have your keys sort of entirely suspended from the top. Whereas with a clavichord, typically you have the strings over the top of the instrument. Your keys are sort of underneath, and then they have an arm that extends out a certain length to meet the strings, and then they'll strike up. They'll have essentially I guess the analogous part would be what I think is called the anvil. The anvil here, that part. They would have that. A clavichord would have the strings sort of over top, an arm extending out the back of each of the keys, and it would strike the key, or the key would strike the string when you hit it, kind of like this. It would go up, strikes the string. Conceptually, it's very simple. It's very, very simple. You just have strings and keys with a little thing on the end, and that's it. But in practice, I had all these arms cut out. Each of them had this little holder for a piece of fret wire, and it would come up and it would hit the string. And then there's all these other considerations where, how far apart are the strings? What angle are the strings at? Where do you put the other end? And how far apart are they? And how do you dampen the other end of the strings? And do you play? Because clavichords especially will have multiple notes, multiple keys on one string. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can have them all right next to each other, or you can have one string play all the C's, or stuff like that. But this was much easier, I think, in execution, at least as I approached it. So let's take a closer look. So the structure of this thing, like I said, it's two 2x12s. It's not really the best material for an instrument like this, but it was what I had lying around, and it got the job done. It was good enough. This one's even got holes in it. It's good enough. So that's what keeps the tension of the strings. And then over here is this little tuning block with all the tuning pegs in it, and then all of the strings kind of go up over this little kind of saddle thing, through all the bunched up sock over the anvil, and then across over here, full length of the string, and then over the pickups and over here to the bridge. And then there's this cute little string retainer thing I got going on. So that goes over here to the electronics, the jack. The jack is just two pieces of metal. That's the secret. If you want an instrument jack, like a 1/4-inch audio jack, and you don't have one, you can just bend two pieces of galvanized steel hanging strap, a funky little arrangement like that, and end up with an audio jack at the end. As you may have heard, all the buzzing, it's really not the most electrically sound thing, but it is enough to get some sound out. I also overestimated how far out the range of these pickups goes. So there's this little area in the middle where one of the strings doesn't quite get covered by either pickup, and so it's a little quiet in the middle. The lowest string is a little quiet, and the highest string is a little quiet. Thankfully, the highest string is broken. The striker on the end, on the bottom, you kind of see all these little... They're cut out of MDF. I hot glued them to the bottom of the keys. They work okay. Yeah, I think you can imagine why that one fell off. It wasn't super securely on there in the first place. Yeah, those are all the strikers on the bottom of the keys. They really could be made a little bit more uniformly. Probably the keys themselves could be a little more uniform, but that's how that goes. And we've got the keys themselves. These are 3D printed out of ABS. I did that years and years ago. Like 4 years ago. Not that long. Printing these was kind of a nightmare, mostly because my printer sucks. Or rather, the printer I had sucks. And these springs on the end, this I think is quite clever. I got a kick out of that. It's just a piece of what I think it's like PVC or something. Just this little 16th inch sheet of PVC, something similar. Cut some little slots in it, bent it kind of at a 90-degree angle, and it manages to press down all the keys. You can kind of see the pivot point is in there with the little silver bits, the washers. There is I think it's a 1/4 inch steel rod that kind of goes through there. That's where all the keys pivot, and initially this little bit on the end that was meant to be a piece that would hold a strip of MDF that would kind of it would extend out the back, and then you could have a little fret on the end, and it would come up and hit the string. That did not work out. This was much simpler. So that little thing on the end is kind of vestigial. It doesn't really do much, except I was able to take advantage of it in this design by having the springs kind of pressed down on it. So I think it all worked out in the end. I think this is a rather elegant solution given the kind of crappy situation I put myself in. So the back to the keys, back to the strings rather. Presses down on top, kind of above the key, and every time you hit a key, it comes down. Oh, that's this one's broken. It turns out. So, okay, I had heard that strings, quote, sound best when they're closest to breaking. When they're very, very tight. I have kind of found that to be true. It's especially on stuff like this, they do tend to sound the most clear, the clearest. They have the best kind of sustain if they're really, really close to their breaking point. However, that means that when you're tuning them, they tend to break. They just snap off. And these are just regular guitar strings. I think they're nines. I just bought 6 sets. It's a 37 key keyboard from, I think, A1 to like A4, A5, I don't know. Something like that. It's around there. I initially planned it to be an octave higher, which would have made this way smaller. Would have made that way, way smaller. Literally, the halfway point for the furthest out string is like here. The bridge could have been here. But clavinets sound especially good in the low range, as I'll demonstrate for you in a second. So, clavinets sound especially good in the low range. Up high, they sound kind of twinkly, kind of sharp. In the mid-range, they start to sound a little meatier, a little more round, fuller. But then, get all the way down to the very end, and they sound really, really kind of sharp, really punchy. And that's what I think clavinets are best for. So this is where they really sound really, really good. It is, alas, still a little bit out of tune. I tried to put it in tune before the video. It didn't really work all that well, I guess. Turns out it's pretty hard to keep in tune. But anyway, it worked out. So that's why I extended it an octave beyond what I had initially planned. The downside of that is that, man, were we close. Look at this. So this is a low E string from a guitar, and you can see the winding here. Just barely makes it to the end. Now, granted, I only needed to have this part work up till this, and then I just need to have something beyond it for the key to hit, and a little bit of room for the tuning peg to grab onto so that it can be tuned. Part of this is my fault. Well, really, it's my fault in both ways, but ideally, this would have been, the tuning pegs would have been a little bit closer, maybe around here, and this would have been, there would have been a lot more of this, it would have been tighter. This is, well, I don't know about tighter, but this is the dampening part, because when you let go of that key, so you press down on it, see if I can get a shot of it. So when you press down on a key, it hits that string and then pushes it right down until it hits the anvil. So it actually hits. Yeah, you can kind of tell. Difficult shot to get, but I think you get the gist of it. So when you let go, that string wants to keep resonating. It wants to keep moving, keep vibrating. You need to stop it somehow. Especially if you want that meaty, punchy sound that clavinets are known for. However, that's really hard to get because you got to stop that thing from shaking. And so I think what the actual like Hohner clavinets used is a bunch of yarn, some kind of yarn, and they would weave it through the strings, not unlike this. And then they would, I don't know how tight they pulled it or how much they used, but however they were doing that, it seemed to work pretty well. I tried to approximate that with this old fuzzy sock I had. Turns out it doesn't really work that well. Another thing I tried, in vain apparently, was this little strip of felt on top of, I don't know what you'd call this, string retainer, saddle, whatever. You can kind of see it from this end. Two pieces of MDF there, and then this little itty bit of felt on the top, super glued to the top of this MDF. It helps a little bit. I think mainly it helps the strings just slide a little bit better because it gives them a little bit of a softer surface instead of the MDF or another kind of wood, which can get kind of tacky, sticky, especially if it's against just bare metal strings. So I think it helps a little bit with that, less so with the wound strings. But I think it does still make a difference. I think it does. So ultimately, the whole string system worked out. It didn't really work that well. What I would change is I'd move the strings, I'd move the tuners closer to the anvil. I'd have more damping, because every time you play a note, you hear this huge dog in the background of all the other strings vibrating of this big cacophony. It's kind of like you have the sustain pedal up on a piano, and you have the sustain pedal down, you play something really loud, and then you kind of let go. You kind of let go of the keys, and you hear this big in the background of all the keys resonating. I mean, every string in the piano resonating all at once. It sounds like crap, and that's essentially what we've got here. Ideally, that would not happen. This end, a little more straightforward. There's a little aluminum bracket with the ball end of the string, goes up. That's a piece of fret wire and some plywood, screwed down onto the body, goes right over these pickups. These are 6-string bass pickups. They're supposed to be humbuckers, but they're not very good at their job. Maybe I wired them wrong. I don't know. It's been a minute since I put this together. It works okay. Honestly, I'm pretty satisfied with this part. You can see the missing string there, the one that broke. And then this other string going through all of those, that's to ground it. That's to ground all of the strings. So you can see this comes all the way down, and I wire nutted it into the ground wire of all this stuff. It could have been done better. But it does work. These handles, it's just PVC pipe on some, I don't even know what that is, a piece of a 2x4 or something. And then some hanging strap on top. This is this little thing on the side. I don't know where that came from. Scrap bin. Looks like it was part of some kind of a piece of furniture. I don't know. But to be honest, that's really all there is to it. There's not a whole lot going on here. The back, you see these little dots? That was from the screws I used to keep the plastic on. They were a little too long. And so I just took a little piece of wood and I screwed it onto the end. Mostly so I wouldn't poke myself, but it does actually look pretty cool. It turns out looks pretty alright. I think that's about it. That's about all I had. A little bit more about the tuners. The tuners are, these are zither pins, just regular, like whatever zither pins. They're supposed to come with this super specifically sized drill bit so that you get a very, very particular hole to keep them in. Turns out, it's like, I don't remember what it is. It's like 0.108 inches or something. It's some ridiculously specific, it's like a number 23 drill bit or something. Well, a 3/16 drill bit, I believe, is like 10 thou off. It's like a little bit smaller. I don't remember. It's very, very close. There's a common size of drill bit that's very, very close. I believe it's a little bit smaller. And if you use, something kind of spongy, like this not that dense plywood, it's like, I don't know, it's like birch plywood or whatever, but it's, still wood. It's kind of spongy. It's not a pin block like you would really like it. I think a real pin block would be, well, in like a piano, I think it would be maybe a 1/4 inch of maple and then a 1/4 inch of maple going the other direction, and some super duper tough hardwoods keeping all of that together. This is a little more haphazard, and honestly, I've had a couple projects where I put these zither pins in a plywood like this. Never had an issue. It sticks fine. There's some people that build super sophisticated instruments like psalteries or dulcimers or whatever, and they're very particular about it, and they'll say, well, no, you got to have the exact right drill bit to do the holes there, and I'm sure you'll get better results if you do it that way, but for where I'm going, this is plenty good. This is more than enough. These, I think, are some enormous deck screws I found. Just drove right into the side to keep that all square. Honestly, I thought that was just going to snap right off. I'm pretty impressed with how that's holding up, because the amount of tension on these things, there's 37 strings on this little piece of plywood, and it's been like 2 years, and all of those strings are tuned right to the breaking point. It's crazy. But yeah, it's held up pretty well. I never use it, mostly because it's borderline unplayable. As an example here, each of the keys. So ideally, the keys were going to have little guides in the back. There was going to be that piece of MDF sticking out the back of the key, and that was going to have a little plastic guide going on either side to keep it kind of in line. And then you could have it pretty far away from the pivot point, and that would really keep it from rocking back and forth, or even rocking side to side. That didn't work out, of course, because I didn't have this stick on the back. But what we did end up with was some very flexible keys. Very, very flexible keys. Mostly, I probably could have tightened the tolerance on the hole a little bit, especially with a better printer, or printing in a different way, or there's lots of things I could have done, but I wanted to prioritize having this be a very loose joint so that you could easily actually hit the keys and not have to worry about keys getting stuck down and then coming back up. I've played a couple pianos like that, and they are infuriating to play. Granted, this is infuriating in a whole other way, because every time you play, all the keys shift side to side. Yeah, it's not exactly the best setup here, but maybe 80-90% of the time, you do actually hit the note. Sometimes you do just slip off the side. You try to hit the note, and the striker on the bottom just misses. Slides right past the string, you get a little thunk, and the note doesn't work. Again, another thing to improve on maybe the second version. I am not building a second version. If any of you want to build a second version, you are more than welcome to. I would love to see other people give a crack at building their own clavinets. I think they're incredibly cool instruments, and there's lots of people that build their own clavichords, but I haven't seen very many clavinets. I think we ought to. I think we ought to see some more clavinets. Anyway, I think that's really all I've got. Not that much to it. One more note about the strings. The process of determining the lengths was a little bit difficult. You could do some crazy math about, well, for a string of this given size, and if it's made of this material, then it can have this many pounds of force on it, or you could go really the physics route and start going into, it's got this much, what's it called, linear density or whatever, like mass per length or something. You could figure all that stuff out and do a bunch of math and figure out, technically, if you take the average and keep the limit where the strings aren't going to snap, you can put the bridge here and have it at this angle, and, do math ad nauseum. I got a guitar out, and I was like, well, if I want to have this note played on this string, how long would it have to be? And then I moved back, like, I think 2 or 3 frets to give it extra tension, which did actually kind of work out. I mean, they're not super tight, but they're pretty tight. It's noticeably tighter than a guitar. Part of that, of course, is probably because there's 37 of them, so when you put your hand on it, it feels like there's 37 strings instead of 6, but they're noticeably tighter than on a guitar. But anyway, yeah, a word of advice for anybody going after that themselves. Just a big piece of paper, a guitar, a couple rulers, and like a few hours of time saying, oh, well, if it doesn't snap on the guitar, it won't snap on the clavinet. Yeah, it was a little bit of a puzzle. Oh, yeah, and then the anvil. This is plywood, and that, so over here, that's fret wire. For some reason, I didn't want to use fret wire on this one. Probably because it was significantly longer, and I don't know, I'm cheap. I wanted to save my fret wire. So these are nails. These are sections of, like, 6D roofing nail. No, not roofing nail. Finish nail. I don't know. They have some coating on them. They're literally just, I cut a little groove in that plywood, and I glued them in there. That's all. It works pretty well. I mean, they're nails, so they're pretty hard steel. They hold up well, especially to impact. Never had any issues. And also, you don't really have to worry about having them all level like you would on a guitar, since there's only one per string. So if it's a little bit too high in one spot and a little bit lower on another, you don't really have to worry that much because it's each key is going to reach the anvil eventually. That may be one reason why there's such a significant difference in travel on some of these. But some of these are pretty close. Some of them are a little further off. And of course, if you take into account the flats and sharps, like, what is going on here? Yeah, could have been better. Honestly, though, I think for a first attempt, not bad. Sadly, I am going to take this apart. I'm moving out. I can't keep it. I never use it. It's borderline unplayable. Sounds bad. It's also, literally just constructed of pieces of plywood, so it's not like we're losing a great relic of history. Yeah, taking it apart. Figured I'd do a little rundown of what it is, how I made it, what's going on here. Because I think some of you would like to know. Anyway, hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.